So what we really wanted to get to today was to talk through some of the techniques that we did, that we followed in order to do a web accessibility evaluation and remediation process. This was something that we worked on with Ryan Wells from CABS, as well as a couple of other folks. So what we're going to go through is, this is our agenda, I guess. Thinking about who you need to have at the table when you're having these discussions. This was something we really learned a lot about. Talking about our process from using the automated scanning tools and then bringing in manual evaluation, how we reconciled that into a spreadsheet, and kind of talking through a project plan as a result of that. What the remediation process looked like, which I think Ryan can speak to, and then how we did quality assurance and just some of the challenges and observations we made about the approach and just how things went in general. So I guess we want to go forward. Right. So one of the things that we've learned the past couple of years doing accessibility work is that it's very important to have all the right individuals in the room. And another thing that we've learned is that accessibility sometimes doesn't feel like a binary thing to a lot of folks. So in addition to having an accessibility person in the room communicating with leadership, I think that we found that it was very important to bring in the web developer, Ryan Wells, in this case, in order to have conversations around scope, technical findings, and things like that, and how we were going to fix different issues that we found. I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to add to that, Ryan, just about the importance of that.
No, we'll touch on that in further slides, but having everyone in the room this last time was really beneficial, as opposed to kind of, you guys doing the evaluation, sending that to us, and then we kind of look at it. We may have confusion over certain items, and it just kind of extends the process.
Yeah, agreed. I think that it really shortened and aligned our process and made sure that we were all on the same page. And the reason there's parentheses, S's after all that is it can be important to have different perspectives in the room when we're having those conversations, just to make sure we can all be in alignment and are making sure that we're documenting actual errors and things that can be fixed in reasonable ways. If you want to go to the next slide.
Okay, so this is actually where we brought in the automated scan, which is Ozart. So I know a lot of you have heard about it or are interested in using it. So this is kind of how we incorporated it into our process. It actually is broken up into categories. So for example, tables or images. And then each category allows you to create a data sheet, which is all the issues per category broken up per issue. And so basically, we generated a data sheet for each category, and then each category we kind of ran through and picked out the biggest issues, which are kind of easy to locate since they're usually the areas that have the biggest amount of problems. And then we kind of removed non-issues. So within the scan, there's going to be a lot of false negatives. So things that the scan's going to pick up that's saying that this might be an issue where it's actually a non-issue, or something that it's something that you're not going to fix. And then from those data sheets, we compiled a master list, of all categories. So this is kind of something that we based our evaluation off, went through line by line of how we're going to go about fixing these. And then we included descriptions for each categories, because sometimes it's not very descriptive of like what the actual issue is. So when we go back to talk about with Ryan what these issues are and how we want to fix them, we have a little bit of better idea of what specifically they are.
Yeah, I think that this step was really important, and the data sheets that you can get out of the summaries, is that the right terminology, Brooke?
Yeah.
Were really useful. And then if you want to move into the next slide, Ryan, I think the next piece that was really important was thinking about the scan data and connecting that to the user experience that persons with disabilities would have using a website. And a way that we can check for that is by doing manual evaluation, thinking about different use cases for how different types of individuals might interact with things. So we reconciled our spreadsheet of Ozart findings through the summaries and the different categories with manual evaluation.
So
and there was a way
manual
that you talked about
evaluation is
that
never
with
going to
Brooke.
replace a scanner. As much as the tool is helpful, manual evaluation is always going to find the big issues. So navigation errors, is navigation consistent? You're going to find keyboard traps. Can you keyboard through all the material? Can you navigate through it? And then is it able to interact with the screen reader properly? Those are going to be your big issues, and those are the issues that we compiled with the data sheets from Ozart. Ozart picks up more of like the small things that are really important, but these are going to be your big issues that you're also going to find just with a manual review.
Yeah, and I think that when we were looking at the Ozart spreadsheets and then putting that against the manual evaluation, it helped us like find areas that we wanted to focus on with the manual evaluation, putting some extra scrutiny there, and it was pretty useful for that. And kind of how we do manual evaluation involves a couple of different sweeps through a website. So thinking about doing a visual review, so thinking about your color contrast, things like that you can quickly get through, keyboard only review, and then doing a code and screen reader review. And we're actually working with Graham and UARC, Usability, Accessibility Research and Consulting, to develop something that will help you guys with how to use manual inspection, as well as thinking about how to incorporate Ozart in that as well. That was a piece of feedback that we've been getting from a lot of folks in this room. And in the past, we haven't really been too prescriptive about techniques for how to evaluate things, and we think that this will be extremely helpful.
So just want to talk a little bit about the project plan. So as Brooke mentioned, we merged the findings. We exported the CSV files from Ozart, and we stitched those together manually into a Google spreadsheet, which would become ultimately our project management / project status reporting solution in this case. And this is really the fluid part of the project, and where I saw the value be apparent, where we sat down together. Once we had the master spreadsheet, we went line by line. We talked each item through. We vetted the findings, we weeded out the false positives, and then the ones that were relevant, we discussed. Okay, we pulled up the web page, we identified what the problem was, and then me being a web developer, I may propose a technical solution to remedy that, and then Phil or someone from Nate's team may say, well, that would work, that could meet the requirement, or that may not do it, but what if we approached it this way? And we kind of moved very quickly and just went down the line. And then your team provided descriptions for each finding and how they relate to the various success criteria within the WCAG 2.0 AA specifications. And then I was tasked with, at that point, at a later date, to go through the items once again and attach a time estimate to each one. And some may be a quick fix, it may be alt text, it could take 15 minutes, 30 minutes, depending on where it's at in the CMS. Some were a little more involved. It could involve a redevelopment of a piece of functionality. At that point, I may put a note in the notes column, investigate solution. I may pad the time estimate a little bit. And at that point, then you want to identify who's going to be involved in the remediation, work with your local stakeholders, allocate resources for the effort, and then discuss timelines, calendar time based off of the scope of your project plan. And in our case, it was me and a part-time student, Griffin, who isn't here today. And we had to establish a workflow rather quickly, and it became apparent that there were quick fixes that you may just go right into the CMS and just adjust some alt text. There were others that you could just make through DevTools, and you could take your code and stage that in a text document and then port those into the CMS. And then there were other changes that were a little more involved, where we had to pull the site down from the repo, create feature branches based off of each line item, and so we could work concurrently, make those changes, verify that they're working correctly, then manually port those into the CMS, and publish to the dev server, verify the fixes are still working correctly. At that point, you want to do a lot of browser testing, device testing, then we would merge our changes into master.
And did we want to show some of the the Excel sheet,
Sure.
perhaps,
So-
just to give folks an idea for some of the different columns that we used in there? Yeah, that was kind of like our go-to project communication document. And we used it in all of our phone calls or any kind of communication we had, whether that was in person or over phone.
So this was our project plan. And then I added some formulas to calculate percent complete. And these are the pages in question. There were essentially three pages: msu.edu's main homepage, msu.edu/about, and the admissions homepage. And you can see there added an assignment column. So those are members from my team. And as you add the status as being complete, so we made sure to mark it as in progress as we were working on it, so at a glance we could see who's working on what. If something's blocked for whatever reason, then you would add a note, requires additional research. You can add notes. And then I believe, Nate, you use the spreadsheet to report your weekly status reports. And then down on the lower right is the total percent complete for the total effort. Kind of quick and dirty. I mean, we have Jira available in our area, but we just decided not to Jiratize this project. It just seemed a little kind of overkill for this effort, because this is essentially going to take us 2-3 weeks to complete. And we wanted external stakeholders to be able to log into this very easily and just kind of see what's going on.
Yeah, so there's a couple different columns there. You have like the criterion, so that we can track each violation against which criterion it was a violation for. And then we, again, had the assignment category, as well as we had a QA category, which is, I think, what we're moving into now. So for the quality assurance process on this, we actually ended up using the WAVE tool, as well as manual inspection again. So what we did with WAVE was we just ran it to make sure that we hit the 0 errors marker. And then we went through line by line on the spreadsheet, working with Ryan, actually over Zoom, I think it was.
And that, again, there was value there with doing it in real time together, because I think in the past, you guys have QA'd and then turned back around.
And it comes back.
It's just additional meetings and the email thread kind of grows. But yeah, it was just an hour Zoom session, and we kind of went back through line by line. Worked really well.
And it was definitely valuable, because sometimes when we send over these, like when we're rechecking things to make sure that they've been made accessible, there'll be additional conversations that need to happen. So actually doing the QA process over while we were on Zoom together was really beneficial. And again, we brought in a different accessibility person at this point. Previously, Brooke and I had worked on it, and we brought in Mac, who is another student that we work with, to help out with QA. And what that looked like was testing with different browsers and different assistive technologies, and thinking about different use cases for individuals with different types of disabilities. But I think the most important part of that was that it was a little bit more collaborative than most QA processes that we've done in the past. We really learned a lot from working on this one with Ryan. So we wanted to talk about a few things that we had noticed as challenges in the past and why that informed our approach. One of the things that we've had a lot of conversations about is sometimes there will be accessibility errors, which there can be a variety of ways to fix something, or there may be different perspectives on accessibility issues even sometimes, because even if you're meeting WCAG 2.0 AA to the letter of the standard, you still may not be providing full accessibility to some individuals with disabilities. So the reason that this was important was because it informed our approach throughout this project. As Ryan mentioned, we had conversations at various different stages when we were doing the review, when we were setting up project planning, and when we were doing QA. And that allowed us to kind of navigate around what has previously been sometimes a lot of back and forth conversation over email or phone, and those can be frustrating conversations too, because Imagine if Ryan comes up with a fix and then we say, hey, it's not working for like this specific use case in this specific browser. That would be really frustrating for Ryan, I imagine. So I guess we wanted to talk a little bit about some of our tools, but we also have those listed up on Web Access, our website. And this was something that I think the Web Accessibility Working Group a long time ago kind of put some effort into, especially York, maybe especially Graham. But some of the assistive technology that we use is NVDA, JAWS, and VoiceOver. The reason that we use these specific pieces of technology is that there's a screen reader survey put out by this organization called WebAIM, and these are noted as being widely used screen readers. JAWS is very commonly used on PC in the workplace. NVDA is fairly commonly used on PC in the workplace and for personal use. VoiceOver obviously is built right into your MacBooks, and it's a pretty good screen reader, especially on mobile. Some of the testing tools that we used for this specific project were Ozart. Specifically, we employed the summary categories, which allowed us to think about scoping and some of the different issues that the scanner had picked up. Wave. We always use the color contrast analyzer because it's important to get the visual representation of color, not just necessarily the hex code when you're checking for color contrast, just in case you have very thin font where everything might be anti-aliased. Element Inspector, Dev Tools, standard stuff that you use when you're doing web updates. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add to the slide, Ryan?
No, it was interesting with the screen readers. I think there was one kind of uncovered a bug. It may have been in Safari, don't quote me on that, but it was the way you take some display text and you transform it uppercase so it appears uppercase visually, but it was reading it as an acronym. But in some cases it wasn't in other cases, so that was interesting.
Yeah, and that's one thing that we like to talk about, just like even if we have perfect code, it has to go down the line and go through the browser, which will have to, present the code, and then hit the assistive technology, which will interpret that code that the browser has presented in different ways to the user. So accessibility is sometimes it's a thing that changes over time, specifically when like HTML standards change or browsers receive large updates.
So the overall impact was apparent, at least to me, following this. It's not just about meeting the WCAG 2.0 success criteria for each item, but this is by no means doctrine, but in my mind, accessibility kind of plays into usability, and you can't have that, fully usable experience unless you do meet all of the accessibility requirements, and then that kind of drives user experience, which is the overall perception. It's kind of a spectrum between delight and frustration, and so a lot of these fixes tied into just improved, contrast. The site the readability went up. Being able to hit the escape key and exit out of multiple windows and things like that. So there was a lot of value there by just going through this remediation process. Code hygiene. So it's interesting. We addressed a lot of, well, not a lot, but we stumbled on there was some JavaScript errors and some HTML validation issues that may not have led to an accessibility error, but that was a great time to kind of solve those and tidy up your code. And again, that plays into bug detection.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that going through an accessibility process on your website will definitely benefit you beyond accessibility, because you're putting such a high degree of scrutiny on the site and you're thinking about things from the user's perspective. So that's something we've also noticed when we're working on courses too, is that sometimes we'll just notice things that we might have an idea about for usability, or maybe you're missing a file or something in your week 3. And those are things that accessibility as a process can uncover for you, which is definitely an added bonus, I would say, if you needed any more convincing on doing accessibility stuff.